Hey everybody, thank you for joining us today. Just while I allow some time for people to join live, I will just announce how this is going to work today. So I do have a scripted interview questions that I'm going to run through with our guest here. And after that time, we will go to audience questions just to let you know how that will work. Hello everybody. My name is Mark Allard-Will. I'm going to be your host today, and as you can see, I'm not alone. I'm joined by the very talented, the legendary Jeff Martin, comic book artist and writer from Edmonton in Canada. Jeff, could I get you to introduce yourself and your work to our viewers, please?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. So my name is Jeff Martin. I'm a writer and artist from Edmonton. I'm probably best known for a self-published series that I wrote and drew called Hockey Apocalypse, about mutants gambling resources on hockey games in post-apocalypse Alberta. And also for the series Redcoats-ish, Jeff Martin's War of 1812, which is 2 books published by Renegade Arts Entertainment about 2 incompetent Canadian militiamen in the War of 1812 who probably would have been more helpful to Canada if they'd stayed home.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. So you're clearly a big history nerd, much like myself. Can you tell me about how your love of history has played into your work as a comic book writer and artist?
Well, I think it's really just it's a love of stories, and that's all. That's all history is. It's just a story of what humans have done before us. So I think it sort of led really naturally in working on comics to read some of those stories and realize hey, there's a lot here that I could use to make a book out of. And kind of directly, with Redcoats-ish, the tie-in with history is obvious, but resulted from teaching 7th grade social studies and realizing that, the reason why people think Canadian history is boring is mostly because they just don't know it that well, because it's not handled in a super interesting way most of the time.
Yeah, that's a really... carry on.
Well, and so the reason why I did the book was because I wanted to show that, hey, if you tell the story in an interesting way, then, people can see that, oh no, it's not the history that's boring, it's the presentation that was boring. The history that's here is really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I've got to say, I absolutely loved Redcoats-ish, Jeff Martin's War of 1812. Not only is it hilarious, but it really proves, like you say, that Canadian history is anything but boring. But what is it about Canadian history in particular that made you want to make a comic strip and a graphic novel
about it? Well, but the War of 1812 in particular, I took a course when I was in university called The Military History of Canada. Job it was to sort of tie up all the boats so that they'd be ready to go. Hadn't done it, and the boats had been carried away down the river. And they ended up having to postpone their invasion as they sent infantrymen running down the riverbanks trying to capture these boats again.
I actually didn't know that as well. That's awesome. And so as well, you're quite popular, quite well known as a webcomic creator with Hell Incorporated. I love Hell Incorporated because it's like, for people that aren't familiar with it right now, I could describe it as being the good place. But imagine if we just focused on hell and the ineptitude of hell, and we took that kind of comedy up to the line of PG. What would you describe Hell Incorporated as to people who are watching?
I always like the description, it's The Office, but in hell.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's a workplace sitcom set in hell, about the demons who work for Hell Inc., which is the corporation that runs the place.
That's fantastic. And with that, what is it that made you choose webcomic as opposed to a traditional medium?
Well, so originally I'd done Hell Inc. It was going to be a 24-hour comic, and then the first page took about 6 hours, so I quickly abandoned the 24-hour element of it. But I was still pretty happy with the story I had told. So in 2009, I released sort of a black and white single issue, and then I did a follow-up the next year. But then I kind of, just like other stuff came up, and that stopped being a priority. But when I finished my last webcomic, Heat, which was about space wrestlers, that came to an end, and I knew I wanted to do another webcomic, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it. And then Hellink is always something that I'd told myself, like, I'll come back to this at some point. And then it finally seemed like a good time to actually revisit it, as I'd learned a bunch of new skills in comic creation in the meantime, so I wanted to go back to an idea that I thought was really cool and that I didn't think I had done sort of my most. So I decided, I'll change the format from a standard graphic novel size, vertical page setup, and I want to redo this as a full color comic strip. And that'll be my new webcomic.
It's fantastic. And something that really impresses me personally as a metalhead is that you recently did some of the artwork for an official graphic novel for the American metal band Wall. Can you tell us what that experience was like?
It was really cool. So it came about originally when they did their Orgasmageddon book, and they did that via Kickstarter. And so when I saw Orgasmageddon on Kickstarter, I sent a cold email to the writer, whose contact information was listed on the project, and sent him a comic that I did a few years ago called Where is Zog?, which was directly inspired by the Gwar song of the same name. And it was published online by Heavy Metal. And so I sent that to Matt Miner, who ran the Kickstarter and who wrote both Orgasmageddon and the new book, The Enormogantic Fail. And he really liked the art, and he thought it was, it suited the style they wanted. And about 8 months later, when it came time to do backups for the 4th issue of Orgasmageddon, I got an email from Matt asking if I was still interested in doing something. And that was sort of my foot in the door when Enormogantic Fail came around. Matt had been impressed with the work that I did, and the band liked what I did, so I was brought back to do a whole chapter in the Enormogantic Fail, which is the story's told in kind of a Rashomon style, where each chapter of the story is a different band member's remembering of the same event that's being sort of grilled out of them during their intergalactic war crimes trial. So I got to draw Jizmac the Gush's recollection of their invasion of Flabquarv 7.
That's fantastic. And for people watching, if you haven't checked out the book yet, it's called The Enormogantic Fail, and it's available through Renegade Arts Entertainment. I definitely recommend grabbing a copy. So Jeff, before we begin to wrap up here, a lot of people aspiring to begin creating comics for themselves will often come to things like comic book conventions and stuff like that, where people like yourself and myself are attending, and they will ask for one salient piece of advice on how to begin creating comic books. If you were to give a piece of advice to our audience today, what would it be?
I mean, it's a boring piece of advice, but I think the most useful thing you can be doing is producing some kind of work. Like, don't wait for publishing deals to roll in and people to sort of come knocking at your door asking you for stuff. If you really want to make comics, start making comics, start building your skills and getting a body of work together, and then you can, when you do have an opportunity to meet publishers and meet higher profile creators that have better connections than you, then you have work that you can show that proves, like, yeah, I know how to do this. I have been doing this. I've been doing it whether you guys hire me or not, and will continue to do it whether you guys hire me or not. And that has been sort of in all of the work that I've gotten in my career. That's been sort of the consistent best thing I've had going for me, is being able to show any potential employer or publisher, like, here's all the stuff that I've done, and I've been doing it, on my own, sort of running my own business. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I could do for you. And that's every single time I've been hired, it has been off of some previous thing that I have done. So I think just, if you want to get started making comics, make stuff that you want to read, but be making stuff. And, like, don't worry about making your one perfect thing, because, like, that won't be the first thing you do. Like, the big project that you become, like, widely known for, that's never going to be your first thing. So just make stuff and build up your skills before people come knocking at your door to try and hire you for things.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for that, Joe. So there is a non-profit in Edmonton called Drawn to Books, and you work for a program within that called Drawn to Write. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Well, in short, it is a comic school. So what we do is myself and Daniel Schneider, who is the other sort of head instructor, we and sort of a rotating cast of extra freelancers that we bring in teach kids aged 9 and up how to make comics. And what really separates us from other sort of instructional entities is that we're not an art school. We're not focused on teaching you how to draw. We're focused on teaching you the techniques of how to make a good comic. So visual storytelling and how to lay out a page that will be both aesthetically pleasing and tell the story that you want to tell in a way that serves and enhances that story. And so we've been running some variation of Drawn to Write for 5 years now. And with partnering with Drawn to Books has allowed us to offer sort of the biggest and most expansive version of that. So we've got 2 separate levels of class. We've got a beginner and an intermediate class. And we're going to be teaching pretty much all summer. Between our normal classes are going to be running in August in the beginning and to be continued, which is the beginner and intermediate courses. Those 3-day camps will be running in August, and all throughout July we're going to be partnering with Metro Continuing Education in Edmonton to offer sort of variants of those courses for Edmonton Public Schools students who sign up for week-long camps. And with our current sort of COVID situation, we've really accelerated our work on establishing sort of an online platform through which we can handle these classes. So we're going to be running classes and teaching kids comics this summer. It's just yet to be seen whether we actually have to leave the house to do that.
That's fantastic. And for anyone who's interested in the Drawn to Write program, there is information and a link to the website that is in the description for this live video. So before we wrap up here, I want to hand this over to audience questions, which I can read out to you from the feed here. So if you have a question, begin to please type it in now, and I can read it out to Jeff. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for those to come through, I will add that if you look in the description for this live video, you can see links to Jeff Martin's work, and that includes Redcoats-ish, Jeff Martin's War of 1812 that we spoke about, and then it also includes How Incorporated Elling, the webcomic, and as well the publisher that both Jeff and myself have works released on, Renegades Art Entertainment. They are currently, up until April 30th, the current situation going on, the lockdown across Canada and the world, to help support small family-run independent businesses. They're giving away 50% of each transaction of digital books only. And so if you buy Jeff Martin's War of 1812, the digital copy, you can help give money to a small independent business that may need that money to survive. It doesn't look like we have any questions today. So what I'm going to say is thank you so much for joining me today, Jeff. I really do appreciate this. And if there are any questions, I will forward them on to you. And thanks so much. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Like, share, subscribe.